Good morning, everyone. My name's Jordan, and I'll be the clerk for today's subcommittee meeting, and I'm pleased to welcome you all this morning to the meeting of the subcommittee. I'll take everyone through the first three agenda items this morning. If anyone intends on recording the public proceedings of this meeting, please make this known now. This is not to prevent you, but just to ensure that all parties are aware. Okay. Item 1, apologies. I've received apologies this morning from Councillor Mackay. Item 2, substitute members. I'm aware that Councillor Mark Nagy has stepped in as substitute this morning. And item 3, election of chairman. Can I please ask for the nomination of a chairman, please? Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Nagy, you are today's chairman for the subcommittee.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Councillor Mark Nagy, and I will be the clerk for this subcommittee meeting, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the subcommittee. I will take the subcommittee through the first three... Oh, no, sorry, you've done that, right? Apologies. Moving on. Item 4. As chairman, I will ask if there are any disclosures by members and officers. No. Okay. All right. Have any members been lobbied? No. No, none for myself. Okay. I intend to take item 7, application to vary a premise licence under the Licensing Act 2003 for Hush Heath Winery, Hush Heath Estate, 5 Oak Lane, Staplehurst, Kent, in public. Is this agreed? Okay. Item 7, application to vary a premise licence under the Licensing Act 2003 for Hush Heath Winery, Hush Heath Estate, 5 Oak Lane, Staplehurst, Kent. I will now ask that all persons participating in this morning's hearing identify themselves, starting with the members of the subcommittee. I myself am Councillor Mark Nagy.
I'm Councillor Ziggy Chubinski, member for the Headcorn Sutton Balance Ward.
I'm Councillor Millen, member for Housing Ward.
And our legal advisor?
Helen Ward, legal advisor.
Committee clerk?
Here again, Jordan.
Senior licensing officer? The licence holder and applicant? We have 4.
Sorry, can I please ask that if you speak, just press the red face there.
The face.
That one.
Oh, sorry. I'm not very technical. Sorry, my name is Richard Balfour Lynn from Balfour Winery.
Rose Jones from Balfour Winery.
Lee Hart from Balfour Winery.
And
John Perry, Councillor John Perry, and the ward, one of the 2 ward members for Staplehurst.
fantastic. And that's the witness for the licence holder there. Fantastic. Okay, and the objectors, if you'd just like to one by one.
Andrea Hodgkiss.
Sally Humphrey.
Natasha Davidson-Houston.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, can I ask that all parties confirm that they have received a copy and are aware of the subcommittee hearing procedure?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, the subcommittee will allow all parties to put their case fully and make submissions to the panel within a reasonable time frame. The procedure should take the form of a discussion led by the subcommittee. Any persons in attendance behaving in a disruptive manner may be directed to leave the meeting, including temporarily, after which such person may submit to the subcommittee in writing any information which that person would have been entitled to give orally. Had the person not been required to leave the meeting. If this is not possible, they may be allowed to speak at the chairman's invitation. I will now ask that all subcommittee members confirm that they have pre-read all the papers and other documentation regarding the hearing.
Confirmed.
Yes, confirmed.
And I confirm myself. Thank you. Okay, Lorraine Neal, Senior Licensing Officer, will now briefly outline the application.
Good morning, everybody. Members are asked to consider and determine this application to vary the premise licence for Hush Heath Winery, Hush Heath Estate, 5 Oak Lane, Staplehurst, Kent, TN12 OHX. The application has been submitted by Balfour Winery and is attached as Appendix 1. The hours and activities to be varied can be seen on the summary table at page 1 of the report. The application was correctly advertised and there were no representations from any of the responsible authorities. However, there were 4 objections from other parties which are attached as Appendix 3. The other parties also supplied additional materials supporting their objections on the 16th of December 2024, which was circulated to members prior to the postponed meeting of the 17th of December 24. The current licence and plans for the premises are attached as Appendices 4 and 5. Apologies. The application seeks to enable the premises to operate unrestricted from the special and non-special events restrictions that are currently on their licence. The change would allow the premises to provide a consistent dining experience and off sales that reflect their business hours. The variation would also make conditions 12A to C, 12E to G and 13A to F redundant. The current licence is attached as Appendix 4 and a comparison licence of the variation, were it granted, is attached as Appendix 6. After considering the application, members' options for decision are to grant the licence as applied for, grant the licence but modify the conditions, or reject all or part of the application. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much. Does the subcommittee have any questions for the Senior Licensing Officer? Okay.
Yes, I've just got a question. On page 1, we go to item L on the summary. It says late night refreshment, indoors and outdoors, Monday to Sunday, 23 to 24. Yeah. NA. What does?
It's because you don't require a licence before 11 p.m. So if they finish at 11 p.m, they won't require late night refreshment.
Right. So that's not a drinking up time type thing or anything like that.
No,
so.
Right.
So is there any provision for drinking up time or anything here?
It's generally the opening hours generally reflect drinking up time. So the alcohol finishes at 10 and the opening hours are, or the closing time is 10:30, then that half hour is considered the drinking up time.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Lorraine, can I just clarify, because the E, F and L, so anything that would have gone on beyond 11, in the actual application form, it hasn't reduced that. Is that a discussion that you had with the applicant afterwards? Because the application form itself is just blank. So although I understand what you're saying, because the application proposes a closing time at 11, technically, because they haven't asked to reduce those hours, would that?
No, it wasn't a question. It was because
Thank you. So the effect of the application is that 11 p.m. would be the terminal hour for all licensable activities. Is that correct? Thank you very much. Thank you for clarifying.
Still not clear on the drinking up time. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any difference between the end of the serving and the drinking up time.
I can probably help with that. There isn't built into this application any provision for drinking up time. It's not a legal requirement for it to be built in. It's perfectly legitimate for the sale of alcohol or indeed any other licensable activity to finish at the same time as closing. And if this application were granted, for example, then that drinking up time would be something that is for the premises to manage. Obviously, they cannot go beyond what they're permitted on their licence. The other distinction to make is obviously that there is on and off sales take place here. So the proposal is that the shop would be able to continue throughout the trading hours. And indeed on sales actually is the proposal at the moment, and they just must make sure, if granted, that they don't go beyond what is granted. There's no legal requirement to have a drinking up time.
The applicants will now be invited to provide their opening remarks. Do any of the panel members wish to ask any questions? Oh yes. Yeah, sorry.
In order to provide a degree of brevity, I've sort of written something which I thought I'd read to keep it on track, if I may. Balfour Winery is a well-established winery, vineyard and wine tourism business has now operated for 23 years. In fact, my wife and I started it as a hobby 23 years ago. No one thought anybody would drink English wine. In that time, we've grown our business to become a cornerstone of the local community, not only as a thriving enterprise, but also as a key local employer. 90% of our employees, and we employ about 100 people when we're really busy, 90% live within 5 miles of the winery. Many of them are young, many of them are university students, many of them are children of the people working within the winery. So it's a very sort of family-style business. We provide meaning employment opportunities that support the local community. Our role as an employer, we take pride in being a responsible member of the community, fostering sustainable practices, supporting local initiatives such as the Kent Wildlife Trust, and showcasing the beauty and potential of English winemaking from visitors from near and far. Additionally, we're an active supporter of local charities such as the Margaret Dementia Group and Demelza, with whom we're proud to have partnered. So, for example, pre-Christmas, we had 80 dementia sufferers. We did a Christmas party for them, which was fantastic, and Christmas carols. And it's really, we feel part of the community. This year, we won the Visit England Gold Award for Visitor Attraction Assessment 2024. We're the only winery in this country that has ever won that. And also, we were gold medal for Best Small Visitor Attraction at the Beautiful South Awards, advancing the national finals. These accolades highlight the growing demand for our award-winning experiences. But I must say, just first and foremost, we are a winery. We make wine, and now, after 23 years, we're selling it internationally. We're selling in Australia, Canada, America. So we're proud that a cornerstone of Kent has become something which is an international attraction, and we get visitors from abroad. So our facilities need to match those of the best international wineries worldwide. That's where we are today. We're seeking to develop our premises license to allow greater flexibility to operate during evening hours up to 6 days a week. While we do not anticipate being open for the full extent of the proposed hours every day, this variation would provide us with the ability to adapt to changing business needs and better meet the expectations of our guests. The current restrictive conditions require us to repeatedly approach the licensing authority for amendments, which can be a barrier to growth and responsiveness. Businesses do evolve over time, and we're simply asking for the flexibility to offer a facility that many of our guests would appreciate. There's no question that COVID, working from home, has radically changed the way people operate. We're in a different environment, and we're in a continually changing environment. For example, the change in the budget has meant that it takes a substantial cost to this business now. And so we need the flexibility to continue to employ people locally, continuing to work with guests internationally. We're not a public house. You were referring to drinking up. That's not our business. Our business is wine education. Our business is creating wine tourism, which globally is a big international business. When people travel, they go and visit vineyards, but they expect to be able to eat. They expect to be able to have proper education, proper tours. We're proud. We do fantastic tours. And we're open to the public. You can come any day you like, walk on the estate. There's no cost. You can simply go for a walk. During COVID, we remained open the whole time for people to enjoy the estate. So we're very proud of what we do. And I think that Maidstone should be proud of what we do, actually, in bringing business into the area. We provide our guests the opportunity to enjoy our wine experiences after work in the evenings, which includes tours, educational wine masterclasses, tastings, and the ability to enjoy our locally produced food as part of those wine experiences. With more people working from home, we've seen a significant increase in demand from our guests to be able to come here in the evening after their work day, and we want to be able to meet that demand. This is not about, again I repeat, drinking up or drinking. This is not what we're about. This is about people coming at 6 or 7 in the evening after work, particularly in the spring, summer and autumn, not necessarily this time of year, and being able to walk across the estate, have a masterclass, have a tour, and then have something to eat. And I think that's really today what one expects out of international wine tourism. We also bring a lot of business into the area because we have so many guests coming from abroad, from London. People stay in local hotels, people stay in local business bed and breakfast, people go and eat in other restaurants. So it's money into the whole local economy that's very important. We've always acted responsibly and considerately, addressing local residents' concerns and wherever possible acting upon them in a timely manner. Over the 23 years of operating, we have never received complaints from the police or other authorities, including the licensing authorities. In response to concerns over traffic, we invested in an electric minibus over a year ago to transport guests safely and reduce road traffic. Today, over 80% of our guests arrive by train from London. It's 45 minutes from London Bridge. And we pick them up at Marden Station. Local residents were originally concerned in a previous meeting that the roads between Staplehurst and the winery were smaller, so we now only pick them up from Marden, which has much bigger road to the winery. And because of using an electric bus to pick those guests up, our car park is rarely full. This year we had 45,000 guests who came, of which 80% came from London. And they expect to be able to enjoy sitting outside, doing a tour, doing a tasting, and that's our raison d'etre. It's to promote English wine, and more importantly, Kent wine. So we remain committed to operating in a responsible and professional manner, ensuring that we balance the needs of our guests with the responsibilities to the community. This variation will allow us to continue delivering high-quality experiences while supporting the growth of the local community. Our visitor centre is a component of our wine tourism offering, and while open to the public, everything we serve is carefully curated around our wines. We're not, per se, a restaurant, we're not a bar, we are a winery that's about promoting and talking about and educating English wine. Today, every hotel, every restaurant around the country now serves English wine. 23 years ago, it was inconceivable. We now make 45 different wines. We partner with the only winery that partners Tesco, for example. If you go to Tesco, the 4 Tesco finest wines are ours. 2 sparkling, 2 still. We've been doing this for 10 years. We have 6 wines in partnership with M&S. We're in the Co-op. We have a partnership with them. Majestic have 7 of our wines. So we should be proud. British Airways, our wines are on British Airways. If you go on the Saga, you're all too young, but if you were to go on a Saga cruise, you'd find our wine in your cabin. It's a partnership with Saga. We create partnerships. And you know, we are proud, but we also have to be flexible. And a lot of these restrictions, and I think this is my 7th time coming here, I'm not sure, it is due to the fact that these restrictions keep catching us out, and we therefore need to follow the rules, and we need to then come back and say, look, can we have that reduced? But we're a responsible business. Our pricing, for example, is much higher than local restaurants and pubs. People don't come and drink with us per se. That's not what our business is about. And I think that one of the problems I have is that we do have very few local objectors, but I wish they came to the winery to see what we actually do, which is always difficult for them because they haven't. And it would be great if they did, because I think a lot of their fears would disappear if they actually saw the responsible manner in which we operate. So I think that's my sort of opening statement.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that.
Sorry, at this time it might be helpful to ask if anyone else would like to speak for the applicant, and then you can ask questions on it.
Yeah, no worries.
I just thought I'd introduce, by the way, apart from my wife, who I work for, I have Rose Jones here. Rose is our finance director, and it was just a question of understanding the impact on our business of the current changes in the budget and the needs of the business, if the council's had any questions of that type. And And Lee Hart is our Group Operations Director, who's responsible for making sure that all our facilities work appropriately. And again, if councillors had any questions for him, I thought it was useful for him to come along.
No worries, thank you for that. I was going to say, if there is anyone else that would like to make a statement while they're here in regards to the winery itself. Yeah, Councillor?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to support everything that Richard Balfour has just said. I want to emphasise the importance of the rural economy. It is incredibly important, not just for my ward, but also for the borough and for our county. The rural economy is absolutely vital, and it needs every support it can get. The Hush Heath Winery has been a major contributor to the success of the borough's rural economy. It is absolutely very, very important. And its sustainability is very, very important as well. And I really want to emphasize that. It also produces what I would call a world-class product. It is something that this borough, this county, should be incredibly proud of, because it is a world-class product. You'll find it on British Airways first class. You'll find it on very many high-end restaurants, not only in this country, but around the world. It is very, very important to our economy, and I think that is something we need to support. The winery, as Richard has just said, is the prime purpose of this operation, but what I would call the catering or the hospitality facilities also are very important, because it contributes to the sustainability of this business. This business has to survive as well. It is a wonderful product that it produces, but it has to have the survivability as well. And having this support and giving this experience, if you like, to visitors is incredibly important. And I think this is something that certainly my residents are extraordinarily proud of. And I'm speaking here not just for myself, but I'm also speaking for Councillor Paddy Reardon, who would have been here today as well, but he's had a serious operation and at the moment he's recuperating. But I just wanted to say that Paddy Reardon supports this application totally. What I'm concerned about is that if you put these restrictions and continue to have these restrictions on this operation, it affects its flexibility. I don't know of any other operation similar that has these restrictions, and it seems incredibly unfair, and I think, quite frankly, unnecessary. Because, as pointed out, this is very much, I use the phrase, a high-end operation. It's a very quality operation, and it's very, very important for our borough. It is not a pub, it's not a karaoke place, it is a very serious operation. And in fact, the restaurant facilities face out to the vineyard, so there's no real issue here of noise in my view. So I just wanted to really say how important this is to our rural economy and to our borough. It is incredibly important, and it's very successful, and it's something we all should be very, very, very proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to clarify that Councillor Reardon hasn't put in a supporting statement. He's not a party to this application. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Is there anyone else that would like to make a statement on that at all? No? No worries, thank you very much. Okay then, do any of the panel members have any questions? Yes, Councillor?
Hi, I just wanted some clarification on just a few things. So I wanted, if you wouldn't mind, just clarifying what it is that you find is the restrictive conditions, like what in particular it is that you find is the restrictive condition.
At the moment, in the winter, the winery has to close at 5 o'clock, and in the summer at 6 o'clock. And the facts are that we have people who want to be coming after work, or people coming from London that want to stay longer, and particularly in the daylight hours, particularly in the summer. the spring, the summer, and the autumn. And there's a mismatch between what we have planning permission for in terms of opening hours, which allow us to remain open until 12, which we don't want to do, but it allows us to stay open to 12, and our licensing. And therefore, what we're trying to say is we would like the right for the winery to be able to stay open until, I think, 10:30 at night. I think it's 11 o'clock, I don't remember the exact time. And we'd like we'd like to be able to be open to have the flexibility that if there is a demand, which there is, for people to stay longer or do a tour at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock and then be able to eat afterwards, we want to be able to allow them to do that. That would be normal, as in any international winery tourist business, to be honest. And people expect that. People come from London, people coming from abroad would simply expect that. It's also nice for the local community who enjoy coming, frankly. There aren't many facilities in the area. We are a rural location. And a lot of people like coming and walking across the estate. It's beautiful. And simply going for a walk in a private area where they can enjoy tranquility, frankly, and the wildlife. So that's the key change, if I can put it that way. But we have lots of restrictions that were written in originally when we started out 23 years ago, and I understand that. But we're 23 years later, and I think we've demonstrated that we're a responsible business. As I said, this is not we're proud. This is a responsible, mature, grown-up business. We don't have bouncy castles and kids running around and trains going through it or anything else. It's a grown-up experience. Visitors who come dress up. It's an event, and we want to be able to let people enjoy that.
So that's exactly what I wanted to, like, that clarification. The other thing is so if you extend that, if we grant this, obviously, with the electric minibus, would that also then be extended? And because you said that 80%, I couldn't quite. I tried to write it down, and I'm not sure if I've got it confused. If it's 80% use public transport, or if it was 80% come from London. But if we're doing that, have we already sort of made sure that the minibus for dispersal and for getting people, if 80% of your customers are from London or using public transport, whichever one it was, is those also going to be extended to cater around?
So what I said, sorry, is 80% of our visitors come from London, and they come by train to Marden Station, and we pick them up in our electric minibus, and therefore, when we were open, whatever it was, we would of course run that service, because frankly, in the past, people would arrive at Marden thinking they could phone up Uber, and of course they don't exist, and then they thought they could find a local taxi, which would be like gold dust. So the truth of the matter is, yes, we would not only pick them up, but we take them back. Yes, absolutely.
I hear what you say about the type of people you have at your venue. I've been going to Twickenham for over 40 years. When I first went, no one got up during the game to go and get a beer. Unfortunately now, there are a lot of people who do that and go there for that particular reason. So I'm just a little bit concerned about, I know you say drinking up time, but you can't control what type of guests you get. And if they think it's a good day out, then let's face it, you're going to get there. So you do need to have some kind of control over that type of thing, I think. However, what I'd like to say, how do you manage sound levels when you're having events? Do you have any kind of equipment or anything? Just how would you do that?
There's two parts to your question. The first part is we do control who comes to us. So we're very careful. As I said, our prices are much higher than any local pub or restaurant. So the people who might be at Twickenham possibly looking for a good deal on beer pricing, we don't serve any other products other than our own that we make. We don't serve spirits because we don't make spirits. We serve our own cider because we make the cider from our own apples, but we're expensive. So this is not a place that people come along and go for drinking sessions. And let me assure you that we watch very carefully. If we think someone's drunk too much, which can happen very rarely, we stop serving them. We're very, very tight. We do not want anybody to spoil anybody else's experience. So that's really important to us. Can you just remind me of your second question? I'm terribly sorry.
That was about the sound levels. Do you monitor it in any way? How do you ensure that the sound levels are kept to a reasonable level?
I think with sound, it's very difficult to control. We obviously have bands occasionally. We're not having events every weekend. We're not hosting events every weekend. To my knowledge, there's never been an issue with sound on the licensing that I'm aware of. Number one, we face away from the road, so that everything is pointing out onto the estate. We're not actually that close to the road. If, for example, this Friday we had a guitarist who played in the restaurant a single guitar quietly for the guests because we had a vegan dinner there, and therefore we're not a venue holding parties and live music events per se. That's not our business. You might get a 2-piece or 3-piece jazz band, for example, but it would be playing inside the restaurant and pretty quietly. You don't hear it. I mean, you wouldn't. We haven't had noise complaints that I'm aware of. And generally, overall, these musicians will be acoustic rather than sort of electronically led.
But music isn't a big thing as part of what we do, to be fair. And if you came to a tasting, they're indoors. The master classes are indoors. The tours are going out on the estate. The noise isn't a big issue, to be honest. I mean, we haven't had an issue about it.
Thanks. I'm actually pretty familiar with your venue anyway. But I'll just get back to the minibus. How does it actually operate? Do people book it, or is it every half-hour run?
At the weekends, it's every half an hour. It literally runs throughout the weekend every half an hour automatically, because sometimes people can book, but if someone doesn't book, we still are picking up every half an hour. During the week, people would book it because they're coming from London. They would, as part of their booking in, would book to have the minibus. Yes, that's what we do.
I'll just have one question. Just out of interest, obviously you mentioned that there was a lot of local employment and involvement in the local area. I was just wondering, are you able to just let me know how many employees you have at the site?
At our busiest in the summer, we'll have about 100 people.
100 people.
And a lot of them are students. We offered, one of the things that we've done is we've offered all Ukrainians who've come over full-time employment. In fact, there's one Ukrainian lady who we're now sponsoring finance to do their MSc at Plumpton College to become a winemaker, which is exciting to see her progress. We're a big local employer. There isn't much employment in the area, in truth, and more people don't want to travel to London, and so we do get a lot of people now who apply for us, and we're really proud that people tend to stay with us a long time and progress with their careers. And regularly you've got the children coming. Our head winemaker, Fergus Elias, has been with us 10 years. His father still works with us, was the first winemaker with us 23 years ago. And he's still there. His son, which we also put through college and funded his MSc at Plumpton, is now a head winemaker working with his father. The people on the estate are the same family and they're the third generation on the estate. Billy, the son, joined us when he's 16, he's 34 now. So, and his mother and father worked with him on the land, tending the vines. So it's very much families, that local families that continue to work with us.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yes, well means.
Thank you. If I'd ask a few questions. So the licence at the moment has the special events and also extended hours, non-special events distinctions, so that you can operate later on Fridays and Saturdays. And that's subject to restrictions. Coming on from Councillor Millam's earlier question, those restrictions are that it's 60 people, indoors only, with a full table meal. So I think it might be helpful if you could explain how, if you were granted extended hours Monday to Saturday, how would that change? How would you operate? Would you use the external area? Would you use inside different areas inside? What's your capacity numbers inside? Would people still have a full table meal? If you could give a little more detail on the actual operation in those later hours, I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
One of the changes would be is at the moment our restaurant can open on a Friday and Saturday evening. But the winery has to close either at 5 or 6 o'clock. So there's an actual mismatch between what we're allowed to do. The license is mismatched. And it's mismatched simply because originally when it was written, we didn't have the right to be open on a Friday and Saturday evening till 10:30. So what we're trying to do is get rid of that mismatch. And there's also a mismatch between what we're allowed to do under planning and what we're allowed to do under licensing. And that causes us an issue. It's number one, the 60 number is a bit of an arbitrary number. There's only room, I mean, people can eat I mean, there's no more than 60 seats, but I don't count. If it was 61, I would hate to fall foul of someone saying it was 61, you're in breach of your license. So the sensitivity is not to have large numbers, because large numbers aren't going to come in the evening, in truth. It's just not going to happen in practical terms. But what I'm trying to get rid of is arbitrary numbers that if I breach it by one, I'm in breach of our license. We haven't yet been in breach of our license, and I'm trying to avoid it. In terms of how we'd operate, it's, for example, there's a huge demand for people to come and do a tour at 6 o'clock at night or 6:30 when they've finished work, particularly in the spring and summer, to do a tour and do a wine tasting. And currently, we couldn't do that. And we'd like to be able to do that because there's a massive demand from it. Particularly, as I said, people coming from London. Some people come in the afternoon, they arrive at 5 o'clock, and they've got to go at 6 o'clock. It doesn't make sense. In the winter, it's less of an issue, to be honest, because people tend not to come in the evening so much. But in the spring and the summer, if it's light till 9 o'clock at night, then, you know, if we could do a tour at 7 o'clock, a tour and a tasting, but they might not want a full meal. They might just want to do a tour and tasting and go off to a restaurant or a pub locally, or stay in a local bed and breakfast, or whatever they might want to do. Currently, we're restricted from doing that. So the operation is about giving the consumer, our guests, more flexibility to come after 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock, and to allow them to do that. Obviously, you know, some of them do want to eat, most do, but many may not. Maybe going on to eat somewhere else. So it's really creating more flexibility for the business to be open. We agreed 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock when we started out because we didn't really have a hospitality side. Wine tourism's grown. The world's changed. The reputation of the winery is now international. When we started, no one had heard of us. The first 6 weeks we opened, no one came by. So there's a different demand, there's a different economic demand, but also financially, we need to be able to operate. We need to operate as a business to sustain our business. So there isn't really a radical change. If I'm trying to, sorry, it's a rather long, lengthy answer. I'm trying to say it's to give more flexibility to people to stay later.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly, I agree that the licence has a number of different terminal hours on it, depending on what you're doing there. So you talked a little bit about capacity and 60 being fairly arbitrary, but not much more than you can fit inside. Would that be inside the whole of the premises, or within a section, or within tasting
It's
rooms?
within the eating area in the evening. But we're just trying to give flexibility to the business. I mean, there's so many restrictions that I've lost count of how we manage it.
Thank you. I understand. In respect of hours, say beyond 6 p.m., you talk about people coming along and doing tours, which obviously would be outside. Would you like the flexibility for them to then be able to eat outside, or is the idea that they would come inside to eat?
They'd come inside and eat because we're not serving outside.
From what time would you not serve food outside?
There's two different things. During the day, we serve sharing platters. We're known for our sharing platters and our flatbreads. And someone can come along and have a sharing platter, and they'll usually do that at lunchtime or in the afternoon. And then for sort of after 6:30, 7, people would either not eat or they'd eat in the restaurant inside. We don't serve outside. It's upstairs and it's overlooking the vineyards. It's not road facing. So I don't know if I'm trying to be clear enough.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's everything from me for the moment.
Just to clarify, if someone phones you up and says, I want a wedding for 100 people, whatever, what would your, or a birthday party, what would you do then?
Well, at the moment we don't do weddings, and the reason is that we're open every day, and a wedding changes the dynamic of a business, and usually if you've got a wedding, I mean, there's been 2 weddings because I've got 2 daughters and they both got married there. So there have been 2 weddings, one in July this year. But usually they'd want to take the whole place over, and that's not what we're about, because if you simply turn up, we want you to come in. You have to know in hospitality what you want to be.
I mean, you have a fairly significant patio area, and you do have lunches and things out, use that for lunches and things, which is not just sharing platters, I don't think.
Sorry, it is. If you eat on the patio outside, downstairs, it's sharing platters and flatbreads. That's all.
What do you define as sharing platters?
It's local produce. It's charcuterie, cheeses, vegetables. You've got a vegetarian option. It'd
be like a buffet type arrangement.
It's cold food.
Yeah, cold food, but it's like a buffet. I mean, cold food versus hot food or cold food is still there. So there is you could have an event outside with more than 60 people and lunching. And so in the summer months, would you do that in the evenings or not?
There hasn't been a demand for it. I think it's very unlikely, to be honest. It's not what we've never been asked. It's a theoretical question. I can't answer it.
No? Okay then. Do any of the objectors wish to ask any questions?
Couple of questions. Firstly, the reference that there have never been any noise complaints or any other complaints. Just to reference through our submissions document, we have made reference to noise complaints and issues with noise at the residents' meeting, and also via email directly to the winery. We've directed any issues or concerns we have to the winery, which is why we haven't had any licensing complaints, because we wanted to engage with them rather than go through any other channels. So I just wanted to clarify that point. And in terms of events with regards to music, you know, and the point made about it's a high-end business. You know, rich people drink alcohol too, and sometimes to excess. So we have had experiences of hearing people leaving the winery who are, you know, have had a good time, and we can hear them in the car park. And we have had experiences, which I will come to when I, you know, talk about our submission. So I just wanted to clarify those 2 points. No.
Just a couple of questions to clarify some points that you made. You asked about the late night transport. So if the license expanded and all the conditions were removed, would that apply to the whole premises? And if it applied to the whole premises, you've said that the capacity is, with the outside areas as well, in excess of 300 people. How do you propose to move 300 people who may be there on a Friday night, a weekend night, busy night in the summer, who've your peak times when you've said you're really, really busy? How do you propose to move all those people with one minibus to the nearest public transport, which is several miles away through the rural area? And the second thing is, when you said you want to welcome the drop-ins, how do you accommodate those within the area? You've mentioned a few times about proposing to have people that do a tour late at night. If the whole winery is open, they might want to stay for a drink or something to eat, and they've just dropped in. How does that expand your capacity? Because that's beyond the 60 seats you said you had in the meal bit of the winemaker's restaurant.
Let me try and tackle that. You're not going to get 300 people at night. That's not what happens. I think that if you were going to get that, it would be probably during the day on a Saturday. There's not a demand for people to be in those numbers coming at night. In terms of transport, we now don't go, actually it's your request, to Staplehurst, which is the country lanes. We go to Marden, which is 2 miles away, which is on roads that you can pass quite comfortably, cars can pass quite comfortably. In terms of drop-ins, today most people book because we do have a capacity. And one of the beauties of the place is actually, I know you were saying, is tranquility and beauty, and therefore we don't want hordes and hordes of people. That's not what we're about. So in the evening, I suppose you might get 60 or 70 people on a summer's day, summer's evening. Most people don't stay late. We're not asking to be there till midnight or anything else, which we can under our planning permission. People don't stay that late. And people don't drop in the evenings because, you know, you might, to be fair, you might get a local couple who might come in, but as 80% of our business comes from London, most of those people, in fact, the vast majority book, as you'd expect them to do. That allows us to make, because we only have a certain number of seats outside, so you can't just have dozens of people turn up and not be able to accommodate it. So I think your concern over those numbers just don't exist. I mean, they're just not there. We are open on a Friday and Saturday evening. We're allowed to be. You know, this summer we didn't, you know, if you got 50 or 60 people, you were doing really well. That's about what you're going to get. And that's on a Friday and Saturday. During the week, it'll be a lot less in practical terms. And that's why I keep saying the fear and the reality are different. We don't have vast numbers of people. And picking up the point about noise, you know, we are very sensitive. One of the big complaints about noise you made was my daughter's wedding. Well, that's a private event, and that's, you know, it's a private event. It's not a licensing matter, but we don't do we just don't do those big events. It's just not what our business is. And I worry that you're fearful to something that isn't the case. I think we provide a fantastic facility for so many local people and so many people who come to our winery. I would ask the three of you sitting there, when did you last come and have a meal, or actually come on a Saturday and actually see what happens? Well, that's great. And I think you'd agree that it's quite a, it's not a rowdy, there's no punch up, there's no beer flying around. It's not a pub, it's a grown-up, mature offer.
Nice, yeah, okay.
Can I just say, there is a lack of communication. I mean, I complained about your daughter's wedding, but you have all our email addresses. It would have just been nice, because if I'd been having a party at my house, I would have made sure that the locals knew that it was my daughter's wedding. It did make me feel uncomfortable because I'd complained, because I wouldn't have complained about your daughter's wedding. I did have occasion to complain when you say you had quiet jazz music. Sweet Caroline being belted out on a Sunday evening is not quiet jazz music. You know, and I did complain about that, but I certainly wouldn't have complained about your daughter's wedding. You've got all our emails. You could have just dropped us an email and said, this weekend, and, you know, and we'd have been really pleased for her.
I thought we had. I thought Sarah Easton had done, and if she didn't, I can only apologise. As the answer is, because normally we would have done.
We have never, ever had any communication from you about an event.
Hold everyone up. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. To stop this from devolving any further, I appreciate that there are things to be raised here, but we'll do it through the official capacity. If there are there any other questions at all before we go ahead? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you from this side of the room. We will now move on. The objectors will now be invited to provide their opening remarks. So if any of the objectors would like to start us off.
Thank you. I'm prepared something too, and I'll probably be speaking for about 10 minutes and referring back to the submission documents that we presented to you in December. Good morning, my name is Andrea Hodgkiss. I live at Tavern Farm, Wilden Park Road, with my husband and children. I'm here to represent myself and my husband, Sally and Kim Humphrey at Forstall Oast, and Amanda Tipples at Little Hearts Heath. We live in close proximity to the winery. Sally is here with me. Our property is 800 metres from the winery. Sally's is closer and Amanda's is at the bottom of Hush Heath Hill. Firstly, thank you, Lorraine, for rescheduling today. The application poses a significant change to the existing conditions, so it's really important that we are able to provide our objection submission documents and give further detail to the objection. First of all, I draw your attention to the comprehensive written objection we provided before Christmas. I'm not going to read that out, as you have had the opportunity to read it. Our position is really simple. The winery is located in a tranquil location. This has always been the position, it's not changed, and this is the 6th application to vary the premises licence since 2018. And in that time, there have been at least 5 hearings before the licensing subcommittee. So we're all up to speed with the issues and how this has evolved. On each occasion, the winery has sought to expand its public-facing business activities and has asked to vary its premises licence in order to do so. This has meant we as residents have faced with an application on average every 18 months. It goes without saying this is time-consuming and gives rise to anxiety rather than fear about the impact this will have on the tranquil location of our homes, as we have the right to live without excessive noise and disturbance, which is of course a licensing objective. You've considered all these matters before, and you've already struck a very careful balance as to what the winery is permitted to do in this rural location, and the committee should now not depart from those decisions. This is particularly so when the evidence today shows that visitor numbers have more than doubled in the last 12 months, and this application seeks to sweep away all the controls which are at the moment provided for in the licence. I'd now like to remind the committee of some points in relation to previous decisions which are relevant to the application. The winery describes the purpose of the application as to expand the operation of the restaurant without restriction. It's important to remember this is an expansion in both in terms of the number of days the restaurant can operate from 2 days on Friday and Saturday, with no more than 60 people indoors, to 6 evenings a week without restriction on numbers of people attending or whether the restaurant is indoors or outdoors. On top of that, the winery is seeking to remove the condition that alcohol is sold for consumption on site has to be part of a table meal or for those participating in a pre-booked activity. And if that condition is removed, that will widen the number of people attending the site and further increase numbers. In any event, this means the application covers the whole premises as we've discussed, and changes would apply to the whole premises, indoors and outdoors. According to the website, this is an indoor capacity of 270 people. As for outdoors, there are covered and uncovered large spaces which are expansive, and it's proposed will also used until late for consumption of alcohol and food. As a premises of this size, serving alcohol indoors and outdoors will cause disturbance to local residents over and above what we already experience with the current restrictions in place. We already experience noise disturbance from events at the winery, either music or noise from people gathering outside in an otherwise rural location, both on the terrace and in the car park. The topography of this location and impact of noise to residents has been explained and evidenced in all previous hearings. In fact, in 2018, when an application was made to allow very limited events, the committee stated, and I quote from that decision, which is in paragraph 13 of the submission, "They have carefully balanced the requirements of the applicant in operating his business as a winery with some events in an extended space and the need for the promotion of the licensing objectives of prevention of public nuisance and protection of public safety to protect the concerns of neighbours likely to be caused nuisance by uncontrolled licensable activities. Having considered the topography of the area, the close proximity of residents and the likely travel of sound and the concerns of residents regarding quiet use of the premises, members have provided conditions to ensure a reasonable balance." The licensing subcommittee have on previous occasions expressed their concerns about uncontrolled licensing activities in the countryside. What the winery are now seeking is an unrestricted, uncontrolled, public-facing business in the countryside. The situation has gone beyond the tipping point, and it was inevitable we will be adversely affected in terms of noise and disturbance, particularly as the proposals are to remove all of the controls in place. The committee's decision in September 2020 is really important to us because the winery's application to open a restaurant 3 nights a week was unsuccessful. The committee expressly stated that allowing extended hours on more than 2 nights at the weekend was likely to result in public nuisance. And I quote from that decision, "The condition limiting extended hours to Fridays and Saturdays only was appropriate and proportionate to promote the licensing objective of preventing public nuisance. The subcommittee were of the view that 3 nights a week, including a night during the ordinary working week, could lead to public nuisance due to the increase in customers attending the premises later in the evening. The subcommittee felt that 3 nights a week, including an ordinary working day, was likely to cause a public nuisance. However, a reduction to 2 weekend evenings with a limitation on the total number of customers and the further additional controls noted above would be sufficient to promote this licensing objective and ensure that the activities on the premises remained ancillary to the primary use as a winery." Nothing has changed in relation to the tranquil location of the winery, which justifies departing from those reasons and that decision. In 2023, the winery applied to remove the restaurant condition from the licence. In the subcommittee's decision last year, the committee reiterated its concerns about allowing uncontrolled licensing activities. And I quote from that decision, which is in paragraph 23 of our objection, "The removal of the word restaurant from condition 1 of the premises licence would not impact on the other conditions, particularly conditions 2 and 10, which require licensable activities to be ancillary to the main function of the premises as a winery, and that sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises shall be only to those who are attending the premises for the purpose of winery tours, tastings, and vinicultural education. These conditions ensured that the primary use of the premises for the purposes of licensable activities would remain a winery." The licensing subcommittee noted that there was no change sought to the opening hours or any other licensable activities and no significant change anticipated in respect of how customers attended the premises in terms of travel, purpose or the time they would spend at the premises. Previous licensing subcommittee decisions sought to strike a balance which prevented uncontrolled licensable activities rather than specifically the use of the premises for the service of food. The licensing subcommittee accepted that business could and should be able to diversify and noted that there was no evidence provided from the interested parties that removal of the word restaurant from the condition would allow licensable activities to become uncontrolled. I focused on that particular passage because the present situation is that the evidence before you is that visitor numbers over the last 12 months have gone from 19,000 to 45,000, so they've more than doubled. And the evidence before you shows that the winery is looking to increase these visitor numbers further and at the same time sweep away all of the controls. This is clear evidence that the licensing activities have the potential to become uncontrolled. The licensing subcommittee drew the right balance in 2023, and having drawn that line, the licensable activities should not be permitted to expand further. That line should not be now redrawn or altered in any way to permit the further expansion of their licensable activities, let alone remove conditions which are actually in place and ensure that the licensing objectives are met. Those controls are plainly necessary, otherwise how can their removal be squared with the problems we have reported to the winery in the last 12 months, as highlighted in paragraphs 25 and 26 of the submission. The winery shared details of its visitor numbers at the annual residents meeting in March, and you have my note of that meeting in your papers. Sarah Easton, the winery's representative, said that the visitor numbers in 2024 were forecast to increase up to 23,000. A social media post in December, which has been submitted as an addendum, identified visitor numbers were now 45,000. This is a huge number visiting a rural location accessed by country lanes. As public-facing activities have increased, complaints have increased. I want to share my experience of living so close to the winery. I have experienced an increase in disturbance from people walking to and from the winery. They aren't just travelling to the winery via minibus. Some people in groups do walk to the winery. Some leave carrying their bags of Balfour wine, and some do appear to be inebriated. The increased volume of traffic and disturbance is real. We do have more people travelling to and from the winery past our houses at different times during the day. There is talking and shouting in the winery car park, and there has been music played at several events during the year. The social media post of December the 16th also makes clear that the winery's continuing expansion plans, as they say they're excited to build on this momentum with ambitious growth plans. We look forward to welcoming even more of you in 2025. Visitor numbers will clearly continue to increase. Public-facing activities will continue to increase, which gives rise to the potential to more disturbance in a countryside location. The last point I wish to make is that the subcommittee has been clear that each decision is considered on the basis that the licensable activities on the premises remain strictly ancillary to the primary use of the site as a winery, which mirrors the planning conditions in place on the site and is to ensure an appropriate scale of retail use, having regard to its countryside location. Each licensing decision has been made with that in mind and to maintain a suitable balance in this location. I refer you to page 23 of the submissions, paragraph 23. The public-facing element of the business is supposed to be ancillary to the main function of the business as a winery. The idea is that the primary business is that of a winery and all other areas of the business are secondary, and that is kept in balance. When considering the ancillary nature of the public-facing side of the business, it is not just a judgment related to turnover and sales, as evidenced in the application by the licensee, but rather a question of practical impact. The winery produces wine for wholesale and retail, and then there are visitors and the public-facing element. That should be tilted firmly in favour of wine production. However, with visitor numbers of 45,000 and the way the winery is marketed on the website, the impression the public gets is that the public-facing elements are at least equally important, if not more important. The website markets the winery as shop, visit, eat, and as England's best vineyard to visit. In these circumstances, this application, if granted, will upset a balance so that wine production is no longer the primary business. The residents continue to act in good faith. We direct any concerns, complaints or questions directly to the winery as they arise and at the residents' meeting. In doing so, we behave moderately and understand that this is a very important business for the borough. We've accepted all the decisions of the licensing subcommittee, and it is now unfair for us to be brought back to the committee again when nothing has changed in relation to the location of the business and decisions that have already been made. The residents were not consulted about this application in advance, which is somewhat unfortunate given the large number of applications we have had to deal with and how time-consuming this process is. This application is a step too far, and we ask that the application is refused. Thank you.
Are we? Yes.
Would you like to ask all of the objectors and then we could do questions for all of them?
Yeah. Otherwise, yes, does anyone else have any statements at all? Yeah?
Thank you. I live on, excuse me, I live on Five Oak Lane, just a short distance away from the winery. I've also submitted details in my objection, but I just hope to help the committee to understand three key factors. Firstly, the particularly special rural location, which is different to maybe many other places that you have to license. Secondly, the expansion of the winery, given the request to sweep away any conditions to manage the risks of that expansion. And thirdly, to express my support for a local business. So I want to be clear, first of all, that I support the winery as a local business, and I recognise that it is important, particularly for local jobs. But I think it's possible to have a compromise. Listening to the winery and reading their application, they've expressed a desire to expand the restaurant area to 6 evenings a week. And they've also said there's no demand for any late night activities be outside in the outside areas or the wider bits of the winery with licensable activities, that it's concentrated in the restaurants, and that they're not about having major events and drop-in bar services. And I think keeping the conditions in place and allowing them to operate 6 days a week is a reasonable compromise. The commercial growth needs to be balanced against the special location of the winery. The winery is located in a particularly rural area. Five Oak Lane is a narrow country lane. It's single lane in many places with sharp bends. There are no street lights, no pavements, and large ditches on either side. At the moment, the late night visitors are limited to the capacity of the restaurant, which is the 60 people, 60 seats. This application seems to apply to the whole site, which I understand would be some 300 plus capacity in indoor and outdoor areas. There is a history of accidents and near misses on Five Oak Lane and the other lanes around the winery. There were 2 separate incidents on the roads just in the short time before Christmas. I witnessed a van crash off the road on a bend into a ditch on Five Oak Lane, and there was another incident when a vehicle came off the road on the corner of Wilden Park Road at the back of the winery. It crashed through a hedge into a field, damaging a brick culvert and a drainage ditch and leaving sheep to escape from the field. Both incidents were reported to the parish council or the police. In the summer, I reported another near miss when I was cycling. Myself and another cyclist coming the other way were nearly hit by a car pulling out from the winery exit. We have been to the winery and attended meetings and presentations to learn more about the business of the winery. At the meeting with residents last spring, concerns were reported directly to the winery about the cars not stopping to look carefully when they pull out from the winery exit. And residents asked the winery to paint white lines to show the cars where to stop at the exit. My interpretation is that many visitors to the winery are not used to country lanes and the particular hazards of the narrow roads and sharp bends. These hazards are particularly pronounced late at night when it's dark or in the winter. The dangers increase if the number of visitors increases. The roads are not designed for this level of traffic, and there are no measures in the application to mitigate the risks. The rural location of the winery also poses serious risks for noise disturbance. It is very quiet, with little background noise, especially at night. The landscape is mostly open fields, and the winery sits in a sort of landscape bowl, and that means that the sound travels really easily and is much more noticeable than perhaps in a town centre where there's lots of other buzz and noise going on. Even if the noise the winery is making is tasteful jazz, it still keeps your kids awake, especially if it's 6 days a week on school nights. This application asks to remove all the conditions that were put in place to reasonably manage the risks of noise disruption, and it doesn't propose any others. It's asking to remove the condition to limit the licence to the customers having a meal in the restaurant, which expands it to all the other areas. It asks to remove the condition that limits the evening activities to indoors with the doors and windows closed. It asks to remove the condition that limits the numbers of customers for late nights. Nothing has changed in the setting or the location of the winery. Exactly the same risks of dangerous country roads and noise disturbance remain. The last hearing put the conditions in place as a sensible and a reasonable way to mitigate these risks, and the conditions are still very relevant today. There are a few minor problem areas that have been raised with the winery, but overall, I think the late night licence has worked well, and this is because of the conditions that have been put in place to manage the risks. Removal of all these conditions would mean the winery would not be required to have any mitigation at all to prevent the noise disturbance to those of us that live nearby. And further, the application would enable the winery to operate with many, many more late night customers, 6 days a week, which would increase the risks further. It's not the position today that matters, not what they're saying they are doing today, but it's what this change in the licence would enable in the future. The winery has a new executive board, a new operations manager, and it's published ambitious plans to expand. Since the last licence hearing, the winery has increased the capacity of the venue. The indoor space can now accommodate more than 270 people. As well as the main building and the winemaker's restaurant, there are now 2 new rooms within a newly built barn, which are available for private hire. Outside, the capacity is also increased. As well as the terrace and the balcony areas, there are now 2 stretch tent marquees. These outside spaces have no sound insulation. The newly built rosé room also offers additional outdoor capacity with a private patio. The application describes that the variation is to support the growth of the winemaker's restaurant, but removing the conditions would enable a much more aggressive expansion beyond the restaurant. Although the winery has said that's not its intention, that is what would be permitted by removing all the conditions. And if the new board or the new operations manager decide to continue the expansion in that direction, they would be entitled to do so. The late night licence would apply to the whole site, indoors and out, for the full capacity, 6 nights a week. This would facilitate a major increase in late night visitors in both the indoor and outdoor areas. At the same time, it removes all the measures to manage the risks of the noise from so many visitors or from other entertainment such as amplified music. To be clear, I'm not objecting to extending the late night licence for the winemaker's restaurant to 6 days a week, or to allow them to have music indoors 6 days a week. I just ask that the committee keep the existing conditions in place to reflect the things that the winery is telling us here is what it wants, and the fact that there isn't a demand for the other things that would in theory be permitted by what is on the application. So I asked the conditions for limiting the licence to the restaurant capacity of 60 people, that alcohol should be enjoyed with a meal within the restaurant, and that activities should take place indoors to limit noise nuisance late at night be maintained, please. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much for that. Are there any other statements to be made at all? Okay, right. Do any of the panel members have any questions for the objectors? Councillor?
Just one quick one. I mean, if you were to look back over the last 2 years, how often do you think you've had a loss of amenity? So how many times has that really impinged upon your amenity? Unbearable sort of thing. I mean, for example, have you ever reported to the parish council or to the police? Have you had occasion to phone the police up and say, you know, this is going on too late or too noisy or anything?
I mean, we haven't phoned the police. We would phone the police if there was a risk to life rather than a noise complaint. We would speak to the winery about that. Or if there was an issue, if someone was, I mean, it's just not, we wouldn't call the police unless there was a problem. Parish council, I mean, we've been to parish council meetings before to discuss the expansion plans at the winery, and, you know, we've talked to the parish council before about parish council meetings and so on. But we address all of our issues to the winery. A number of times, okay. Saturday and Sunday afternoons. In the summer, yes, every week. And certainly there have been, and the Rosé Festival in the summer was, I think, either 1 or 2 weeks, and there were vintage buses going back and forward every 15 minutes, which I think we've made reference to in there. That was really disturbing over the summer months. Yeah. Sally, have you got any other in terms of? Yeah.
No, I've only had an occasion to send emails a couple of times about noises. You know, they had music a couple of nights, and when you're sitting in the garden, it does disturb you. And the wedding, but I wouldn't have done that.
I've reported particularly near accidents with the road with cars leaving the winery about half a dozen times in the last year. It's all logged on that there's a parish council road traffic incident email address, and they're always reported to there, and also directly to the winery. And the point I'm making is it is worrying, it is a concern, but I feel it's livable with. But the reason it's at that level and not more is because I think the conditions are working, and there are problems, but we can't expect to have such an important business without any problems. So I don't expect it to be perfect, and I think I'm content to put up with the problems that are there now. But those problems will be more severe without those conditions. The reason the numbers are low is proof that the conditions are working.
You did mention about the internal restaurant capacity changing from 60. I don't know if that's true or how.
My understanding is that the conditions that were placed in the existing licence restrict it to 60 people, which Mr. Balfour Lynn's confirmed is the number of seats in the restaurant. That's called the Winemaker's Restaurant. In the discussion and in the description on the application form for this variation, it says the purpose of the variation is to support the business of the Winemaker's Restaurant. that has a capacity of 60 people. That's where the 60 comes from. But because they're asking for that condition to remove the capacity of the restaurant as a condition, my understanding is that the license would apply to the entire site, but you can take advice on what that would be. And the capacity of the site is over 300. 270 internal, plus substantial space outside, but this application also asked to remove the condition that limits the licensable late night activities indoors. So it would apply indoors and outdoors, I think.
Thank you. Just to be clear, currently the premise license allows extended trading on Fridays and Saturdays to 11 p.m. That's subject to indoors only. Those extended hours, which are not actually specified on the license, but from reading the rest of the license, you would anticipate that to be sort of 7 p.m. So in those later hours on Fridays and Saturdays, it's 60 people only indoors having a table meal. If that is removed, as is the variation, then that would permit up to 11 p.m, no restriction on numbers, no restriction on it being indoors or outdoors, although it is subject to the plan that is attached to the license, and also the requirement for alcohol to be served with a full table meal would also go. I did ask some questions about operation, which you've heard the answer to. You might want to hear if there's any more that the applicant would like to clarify on that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Number one, the issue of 60 is, and the problem I have with it, if someone comes and eats at 6 o'clock in the restaurant, which they do, someone can come and eat at 7:30 in the restaurant, which they do, and leave by 9 or 9:30. So the problem with 60, does that mean 60 all day? Because people can have lunch there, they can come, as part of a tour. If the tour finishes at 4 o'clock, they can eat something. So the problem I have with the 60 is, yes, the capacity has not changed. In fact, the capacity of the winery hasn't changed. So I don't really understand the comments on capacity changing. It hasn't changed. In practical terms, you can seat 120 people inside downstairs. 270, they'd all be sitting on each other's laps. So that is practically what is there, and very rarely do you get that number inside. And if you did, it might be at a rainy weekend in the summer. So in practical terms, but in terms of the problem with 60 is the capacity of the restaurant is 60. That is correct at any one time. But if everybody knows that you can do 2 seatings. If someone happens to eat earlier and then comes later, what does that mean to me? Or if they all come for lunch and 60 come for lunch, does that mean they got to close? So in practical terms, it's an arbitrary number. The seating hasn't changed. Secondly, the busiest time, if you are going to go out, and we all know that, is on a Friday and Saturday evening. We're not asking to be open Sunday evening, as you'd expect, but the reality is there's too much focus on the restaurant. People aren't going to come for a meal on a Monday night or a Tuesday night. It's just not going to happen. But what we're asking for is to extend the opening hours of the winery to allow people to do tours, tastings, particularly during the daylight hours, because that's when the demand would be, and to therefore allow them to eat afterwards should they wish to. I suspect the numbers will be relatively limited in practice. We talk about traffic. Our traffic numbers have gone down, not up, because of the minibus. In the past, we had people driving, and we could tell from our car park how busy it is. Today, our car park is not as full as it used to be because of the minibus service and because 80% of our customers are coming from London. So again, I don't understand the point about traffic increase. As far as I can see, it's gone down. In order to deal with the number that come, we're also going to get a second minibus. And one of the problems we had first time round is because the demand went up, it meant that people would be waiting, and that's something we can't allow. So we're going to get a second minibus, which I think is very helpful. I think that we keep talking about the rural area. At the moment, next to all of you ladies, there's a solar farm being planned, Mathurst Solar Farm, which we have objected to. I don't know whether you guys have objected to, but it's going to seriously impact on the country roads, and it's right next to our winery. So I think that should, for everybody in the area, should be a focus of concern, a massive solar farm with all the implications that involves, right next door to our winery and right next door to your home. So a quiet area, I hope it remains quiet, but I have my own fears about that. We have put white lines now across the road in the winery. If you go and look at it today, you'll see, in response, we've put white lines across so people can't pull out from the winery anymore. We were responsive to that comment that was made, and we dealt with it within about a week and had the right company come in and install it. Staplehurst Parish Council, who have obviously, you've made your points about objecting to, have not objected to this application. Indeed, the chairman of it, Paddy, has supported it. I understand he hasn't written in, and I apologise, he was going to be here, so because of his operation he couldn't be here. But he would have come and supported, and he's the chairman of the local parish council, who will have heard the objections that you have made in the past as you reported it. So again, I fear that there's more concern. My concern about these conditions is not to allow us to run mayhem, because that's not what we're about. But what it is about is to stop us keep coming back for arbitrary conditions that we might trip over, like the 60 people eating. Because when does that 60 people apply from? 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, lunch and dinner? I mean, these arbitrary conditions. And we've always served food since we started 23 years ago. We wanted the term restaurant removed for the simple reason that what does it mean if we were banned from being a restaurant, but we were allowed to serve food? So I simply asked for clarification at the last meeting because it made no sense. It hasn't changed. Our business model has not changed. Admittedly, the numbers have gone up, and that's a reflection of the success of the business. But as I said, it brings a lot of local employment. It brings a lot of local business into the area, and we are responsible and we are responsive. But we also can't be responsible for what happens externally on the roads. There were the two accidents referred to that happened were not ours. So we're always blamed for everything, but there's a lot of agricultural traffic and buses and minibuses and things driving around the countryside, and we can't be responsible for them, but they're not ours. We are very careful. There's warning signs, we're conscious of noise, we try and manage it well, we try and respect our neighbours, but also the reality is the vast number of our neighbours love coming there and love the facility. And frankly, if we weren't there, there'd probably be 200 or 300 houses there by now.
Thank you again. Is there any more questions on the back of that? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I think there were some questions there about the 60 number and when it relates to. The way the licence is worded, it would appear to refer back to a previous application. However, my interpretation of this licence is the extended hours, and therefore when the 60 number kicks in, is a Friday and Saturday between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. So it's not going to apply during the daytime. There's one more question, if I may. Yes, it would be 60 at any one time.
completely different 60 people.
Yes, if you were to go in and count heads. Concern has been raised about Friday, 9 p.m. currently. You are subject to a limit of 60 inside with a full table meal. And if the license were to be granted, that would go. And potentially, it means that there could be a very large number of people inside or outside. And that is part of the concern that has been raised. Now, I understand as well what you're saying about the ability to understand the license and to operate more flexibly, which is what you're looking at. One thing that I would ask if you could provide comments on, because I think this might assist the committee, is if you would be open to, if the application is granted, a new condition that restricts the external area. And I appreciate you want to be able to have tastings during daylight hours, tours during daylight hours. So perhaps some condition that restricts people consuming alcohol, sitting and consuming alcohol in external areas beyond, say, 9 p.m, for example. Would you have any comments on that to allow more flexible operation internally, but with restriction to mitigate concerns that have been raised? Thank you.
In practice, the minute it gets dark, people don't sit outside. We don't have external lighting, so people don't sit outside in practical terms. And of course, if I was to say, in the past I've said, yes, that seems totally reasonable, happy to do that, my concern is not the practical issue, is that God forbid someone happens to be outside, one person outside, then I run into the problem with my license. So it's, in practical terms, that's how it will work. If you put that restriction on, which is perfectly reasonable, by the way, I always worry about tripping over it. It's the example of the restaurant, as I said. The original license said you can't be a restaurant, but you can serve food. And that is which we did from day one, 23 years ago. And therefore, the reason I came last time was to remove the word restaurant, not because we were doing anything different. We haven't actually done anything different. It's just that I could potentially be accused of breaching my license. So I live in fear that one person's outside, because they've walked outside to have a phone call, because I'm afraid the phones don't work very well inside, gone outside holding a glass of wine, and is on the phone, and it's dark, and I'm in breach of my license. And that's what I fear most.
Thank you. Any condition would be worded so it could be clearly complied with, and I think that is the problem with sometimes with conditions where it's not clear. So a condition wouldn't say no one can be outside, because you can't control what people will do. The condition would be more akin to something like alcohol shan't be served to people who are outside, or something like that.
That would be fine.
Chair, can I ask for the objectors if they have any comments on that proposal? Obviously, this is subject to your decision generally, but if the subcommittee were minded to grant this application, but subject to restrictions on the external area, how you would feel about that? Thank you.
The external area is the primary concern, and so any condition that would restrict serving of alcohol to people seated in the stretch tents, the terraces, the balconies, late at night would be welcome. I still have a concern about the removal of the conditions to do with keeping activities inside, like amplified music bands, with the doors and windows closed. So that's also one of the conditions. And if there is to be activities, I would still want the windows closed, not for example, the big balcony doors open, which people aren't on the terrace, they're inside, but the structure of the wineries, there's a lot of glass with big, huge opening areas, so music could get outside easily, even though people aren't in outside areas. And the second thing I just wish to clarify is that the operations at the winery have changed in 23 years. 23 years ago, there was no winemaker's restaurant. It wasn't a restaurant. That's recent. So the operation of the winery as a place where a destination where people are coming for a social evening, for a large meal event with a number of wines paired with different courses, a substantial amount of alcohol, is new and different to what started. And the license conditions have evolved over time with that evolution of the business. So I would ask if they're going to expand to the whole capacity of the indoor areas, which on the website is stated to be 270 people. It's not a number that I've made up. It's what is published on the website for the indoor areas available where seats can be booked. If you're going to expand the capacity to 270 people inside, there still need to be measures in place to mitigate the noise of 270 people leaving. And I haven't said that the accidents were caused by people leaving the winery, other than one that nearly hit me when I was on my bike and another cyclist. But my point is that if there's an increase of 270 people coming to the indoor areas every night, the risks of dangerous road driving are more pronounced. So that's what I would ask you to consider when deciding whether to expand the capacity from 60 to 270, 6 days a week.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify one point that you were making there about the doors and windows and internal areas where they're providing regulated entertainment. Because of the Live Music Act, even if the subcommittee were to put on a condition regulating recorded and live music indoors before 11 p.m, that condition would have no effect unless there had been a review of the licence and the condition was imposed. So even if the committee put that condition on, it wouldn't have effect. It's something I want to clarify.
Does that mean the condition as it's worded now then, where it said the doors and windows have to be closed, has no effect?
Sorry, I'm just finding the condition so I can advise on it. Is this after 11 p.m, live and record music will be indoors only and windows and doors will be closed, save for entry and exit? No, that has effect because it's after 11 p.m.
Just to clarify, we're not open at 11 p.m, so we're not playing music, and we're not a music venue. I mean, there's reference to 6 nights a week. It's expensive organising music, and we do it very little today. I mean, as I said, it might be an acoustic guitarist or a violinist, but I think we need to keep this in perspective. We're not a music venue. I mean, and that's not the intention. And also, I don't know where this 270 number comes from. I can only suggest that, Natasha, you come to the winery and count the number of seats, because they're not there. And I don't know, Liz?
I haven't got the website in front of me, but we certainly can't seat 270 people within the building.
Thank you. Have you got a fire risk assessment with a capacity on it?
Yes, we have. I haven't got it with me, though. No, off the top of my head.
But, you know, our busiest time, it's fair to say, is on a Saturday and a Sunday during the day. And that's when we're really busiest. And you might get 300 people, a combination of inside and outside at sort of lunchtime. But generally, you know, and again, I was just coming and Natasha, I don't know how many times you visited the winery. You say you're a massive supporter. I've never actually seen you inside it. If you were to come, count the numbers. Because you can come and count the numbers, and I don't want to disagree with you because I don't want to be rude, but I just think it's just not correct.
Could I just clarify? The numbers I've got are from memory on your website. I think you advertise about 120 for the main building, downstairs, visitor centre, I think you call it. 60 for the winemaker's restaurant, that's 180. You've got a mezzanine area advertised with a seating capacity, plus 2 new rooms. One's called the Bacchus room, one's called the Rosé room, with a joint capacity of about 60, 70 people.
So just to clarify here, I think obviously there's a bit of confusion going on about the capacity of the site. From what I understand, the restaurant itself can hold 60 people, and outside of that, the entire building can handle the 270, the 300 number that we're talking about.
That is correct.
I don't think what the site's planning to do is to extend the restaurant out into the whole site. I think what's maybe the confusion here is that with the application of this license, I think there is a sense of understanding that we are only talking about the 60 capacity site in the restaurant. There's no plans to extend that restaurant facility out and facilitate 300 people's worth of restaurant capacity there. So just to clarify, we are really only focusing on the 60
Okay.
people capacity in the restaurant.
If that was a condition, I'd be happy to limit it to the Winemakers restaurant with a capacity of 60.
Sorry, Chair, just clarify. The application, if granted, would enable the whole of the premises to be used. Yes, in theory, yes.
The application is to change the hours that we are allowed to operate. We're getting hung up on the restaurant. The restaurant is de minimis in the scale of our business. That is the practical situation. The restaurant is de minimis. The number of 60 is the number you can sit in there at any one time. The problem is, as I said, the number, if on a Saturday, we could technically have people at 7:30 coming or 7 o'clock and an 8:30 coming. So the 60 is a problem number for me, not in terms of seating. What the issue is to allow tours, tastings, masterclasses to continue after 5 o'clock in winter and 6 o'clock in summer. That is what we're asking for. And I think we just need to keep focused on that, because we seem to be going down a rabbit hole that was not what we're asking. I understand the consequences of what we're asking,
Yes.
but what we're asking is to extend our hours.
That's right. No, we totally understand that. Thank you. Just trying to clarify so everyone understands. Any questions there?
I'd like to clarify. If you've got rooms that accommodate 270, but the restaurant's only doing 60, what do you use the other rooms for?
The downstairs is used for tastings and masterclasses. The two new rooms that Natasha refers to are simply, there's no food in them, you can't eat in them. They're simply for tasting and masterclasses. That's what they're used for. Our business is about talking about, educating and selling wine. That is our business. The food part of it is simply a normal offer that every winery, Chapel Down, Gusbourne, every winery everywhere in the world offers food, which is logical because you want people to eat if they're drinking. But it's up to a customer. Our business is about tours, tastings, and wine tourism. That's what our business is. So that when customers leave us, they go to Tesco and buy our wine.
Right, no, thank you all for your participation in that. I think that just leaves us with any questions from the applicants for the objectors at all.
No, I don't want anybody to feel that we're not sensitive to the concerns of our neighbours, because we are very concerned at all times. As I said, we've cut down traffic by having a minibus. We've put white lines across the road. We are sensitive. If we think someone's acting in a noisy way, we talk to them. So we are trying to be responsible, but the vast majority of the people who live in Kent enjoy our facilities and support them. And there is really a lack of facilities in Kent. We are a rural location, but we are a business that creates jobs, that creates wealth for other businesses in the area, and we are facing very difficult financial circumstances. That is the reality. National insurance costs, minimum wage, the boys and girls who work for us are the ones most affected in that category, and so our costs have gone up. And if we have a demand from customers to come at 7 o'clock on a summer's evening and do a tour, then we would like to be able to do that. In the past, as I said, the restrictions we agreed to because we didn't have the demand. People weren't involved in wine tourism. We weren't known. And I am proud of what we've created in the Maidstone area. Maidstone should be proud. It's a fantastic facility, a world-class facility, and we need to continue to be able to provide a world-class offer to customers coming from abroad. We're a showcase.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for that statement. Okay, Councillor.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something that was said earlier about traffic, because I'm a parish councillor as well as the borough councillor representing Staplehurst, and I can assure you that the parish council has never had a problem with the traffic on the rural roads in this area. I just wanted to make this very, 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 very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay then, right then, if there's no further statements, yeah.
You asked if there were any more questions. Can I just ask again clarification? With these removal, in the applications requested removal of these conditions, if the conditions are removed and there's no requirement to have a table meal and there's no limitation on the 60 capacity linked to the winemakers' restaurants, what is, and the capacity as listed on the website is 270, can 270 people potentially be in the main building, the private hire areas, drinking alcohol? Would that be permitted under what would the legal position be, please?
If the application is granted, then there would be no restriction on the numbers that you could have inside the internal area. That is subject to, for example, a high risk assessment, which sets a safe occupancy.
All right then, thank you very much to everyone. Before this hearing's, oh no, hold on. Is that one, yeah? Sorry, just double checking. So, yes, before this hearing's closure, I will invite the applicants to make their closing remarks. The objectors will now be invited to provide, oh no, sorry, we are there, aren't we?
This is
yeah.
We'll start with objectors
And then go over, yeah.
So
Closing statements, closing. Apologies, second subcommittee. Still get where now. So, yeah, just before we close this off, if the objectors would just like to make their closing statements.
I think what we would like to say on behalf of Amanda and Sally and I is that this process has evolved over a period of time. Planning permission was granted for the site in 2017, so really the expansion of the site has happened not over 23 years, but over the last 8 or so. So at each point we've come to the hearing and we've explained what it's like to live next to the winery, we've explained what concerns we have, we've explained and we've listened to the responses, and as I've detailed out to you, you've made decisions based upon your concerns for unlicensed activities, your concerns around noise and balancing the needs and demands of the licensee with the location of the winery and with the fact that we are entitled to live in a place that is peaceful and tranquil because it is the countryside. So I would just ask in your decision making that you do continue to maintain that balance, and I think that the request to remove quite a large chunk of this is going to really disrupt that balance.
Yeah.
And I would like to conclude by saying, firstly, please bear in mind that the decision that you make would enable future plans. It's not what is based on today. And with a new executive board and a published statement in lots of sources with aggressive plans for expansion, expanding the activities without any controls gives rise to a future potential situation which is uncontrolled. And the second thing that I wanted to say is that I think there is genuine room for compromise. So they could easily expand the days, which would sustain their business. Nobody wants to see the winery go out of business, but in a controlled way with very sensible conditions, just designed to protect the local people, but also to deliver what the winery itself has said it wants. It doesn't say it wants all these hundreds of people, so we could have reasonable conditions and a balanced compromise.
Thank you very much. Okay, and the applicants, if you'd just like to make any closing statements.
The world has changed, business has changed, and the demand for English wine has changed. And as I said, we're proud of the fact that we can offer so many people employment and make a big difference to the rural economy. The more restrictions that we put in, the more we have to keep coming back as circumstances change. Numbers are really difficult when you start restricting numbers. As I said, in practical terms, I worry what that actually means. In practical terms, the winery can hold a certain number of people, and the beauty of the place is that it isn't some entertainment park where everybody's falling over everyone. That's not what it's about. It's a mature, sophisticated business with adults coming. It's not sort of kids. It's not a kids' entertainment centre, all kids running around screaming. It's a mature business that needs to have the flexibility to deal with different customer demands. We had a group come over from Bordeaux winemakers, a month ago, and they wanted to eat on a Tuesday evening because they were coming from Bordeaux and they were staying locally and they wanted to eat with us. We had to say no because we were not allowed to do it. There were 30 of them. To me, this is nonsensical that we have Bordeaux winemakers coming to England to taste our wines and we can't offer to look after them. These are the type of practical problems I have with the restrictions. It's not the numbers of people just turning up. It's the arbitrary restriction that damages what is an internationally known business, which it certainly wasn't 23 years ago. And I'm asking the committee to give us the flexibility to continue to act responsibly. If we do not act responsibly, then Staplehurst Council would certainly act against us. If we do not act responsibly, we would be in breach of all sorts of rules and regulations, planning and various other things. And so it is not a question of us running amok and going mad because we don't have a restriction. There are very clear rules how businesses have to operate. And there are very clear remedies if we breach those rules for local residents. But to put on restrictions under licensing is causing us a problem which do not accord with our issues under planning. The planners seem comfortable with what we're doing. And as I said, if we breach any rules and our noise levels are too high, it's not a question of alcohol license. You can complain to the environmental officer. And they would come along and measure noise levels. And all these things can be done. So I think that it isn't the duty of the licensing committee to impose rules that there are other authorities that can manage. And the problem I have with what I have currently is lack of flexibility and fear that I will breach one of those rules by accident, which is not what we're trying to do. But we need flexibility to allow this business to continue operate in the way that it does, which is in a responsible manner. And we will always listen to your concerns and we will always try and react to them. But we are accused of many things that frankly are outside our business and are not to do with our business. And that is also something that concerns me. Thank you.
just also like to add about the new executive board. I am a member of the board, as is Lee, sat next to me. I am at the winery 5 days a week. It's key that we have faces there for local residents. We want you to communicate with us. We are here listening to concerns and doing everything we can. But on the comment of aggressive growth, we have to grow to sustain the climate that we've been put into with the announcements of the budgets, the NIC changes. So I hope that just gives a bit of comfort. There are people there wanting to listen to the local community and work with the community, but we have to grow given the climate everyone is currently in.
Lovely. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for those statements. May I ask if the subcommittee members have any final questions? Okay then. Helen, can you confirm whether there are any further matters to be raised or resolved before the hearing is closed?
No, not for me, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I now declare this hearing closed. The subcommittee members, accompanied by the legal officer only, will now enter into closed session to deliberate. The subcommittee will return to closed session in...
It's 12 o'clock now. I think you have...
Yes, we will return at 1 o'clock then. Thank you very much. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for the delay there. I'd just like to read out our statement just to bring this to a close. So to start with, we have considered all of the evidence and wanted to thank all parties who attended. We recognise the important role that they play in the licensing process. We noted the impact of the application and the submissions regarding operation of the premises. In addition, we considered that concerns in particular related to unregulated use of the external area and the impact of the potential increase in capacity. We gave careful consideration to the guidance and law surrounding our decision and the need for evidence to justify the decision. Accordingly, it was felt appropriate and proportionate to condition the use of the external areas. We were mindful that if in the future concerns are made out, we were mindful that if in the future concerns are made out, there are mechanisms to deal with that under both licensing and environmental legislation. The decision of the licensing subcommittee is to grant the application with the addition of one condition, which is alcohol shall not be served to people for consumption in external areas of the premises beyond 9 o'clock. Full reasons will be provided in the written decision, which will follow this hearing within 5 working days. That will include information on how a party to the application may appeal the decision if they wish. The hearing is now closed.